All right, for more reaction to the Four Nations face-off rosters that were announced on Wednesday evening, here is our own Pierre LeBrun, our hockey insider. And this guy and his colleagues, Darren Dreger and Chris Johnston, deserve so much credit because they predicted this roster before it actually happened. But Pierre, take us through the process in terms of Hockey Canada. How did they go about coming up with this roster?
Well, Jay, you're already my hero because you called it the Four Nations Face-Off, which is its proper name, as opposed to the Four Nations Cup, which is what 99% of people are calling it, and it's already becoming one of my pet peeves. What can I tell you? I'm a strange man. Yeah, listen, it's been a long process for Team Canada management. Certainly, I've tried to stay in touch with them as much as I can since last summer. You know, they were in Edmonton and at the under 18 and met there for the first time. And really since then, since the season started, Jay, just to give you sort of a glimpse, everyone in that management group, from Don Sweeney to Doug Armstrong, Kyle Dubas, Julien Brisebois, Jim Nill, Scott Salmon, they would do their own mock rosters periodically, and they would all compare mock rosters, all their individual mock rosters. And of course, you know, none of them were ever the same. Not even to the end. I mean, there was still debate up to last weekend to the final 2 or 3 spots on Team Canada. It's so difficult to find unanimity in such a big management group. And the other part of this that I want to touch on is that John Cooper and his influence as head coach, no one involved is going to say this outright, but I'm telling you that I'm getting that sense that his input was solicited, I think, more so than any other head coach in recent years for Best on Best. They really, I think they knew that John Cooper's their coach for Four Nations and for the Olympics, and they want to know what kind of players that he likes because it's the kind of players he wants to coach. And I think his imprints are on this roster as well, aside from the management group.
And Pierre, you said something so interesting there that, you know, even up until this past week, there was still debate about the final few spots on the roster. In your mind, was there a name out there that did not make this Team Canada team that truly surprised you personally?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I can't just say one because there are 3 or 4 names that I know were heavily in discussions. I mean, John Tavares had an outstanding year and played for Canada at the Worlds last year. The Hockey Canada component here, when you go play for Canada at the Worlds, that carries huge. Mark Scheifele, you know, Wyatt Johnston, you know, these are players that were in the conversation. And Matt Duchene, who's having a tremendous year after playing well last year. You know, there were about 10 players that I know in the last 24 hours got phone calls from Hockey Canada saying, hey, you know, the 10 players that didn't make it, saying that we still value you guys. You know, we're sorry how tough this news is. But, you know, part of the messaging for a lot of these players that didn't make it too is that it may not be over, Jay. You know, this is a tight 23-man roster, and there may very well be injuries between now and 2.5 months from now when puck drop at the Bell Center on February 12th. And a lot of these players, you know, what Team Canada is hoping is, please don't make vacation plans now. You may be the next person on speed dial, and that's a tough ask, obviously. But the other shoe to it, the shoe to drop, there's also the Olympics in 14 months. In 14 months, Jay, the Olympics in Milan in Italy. And this process that has started now with Four Nations, let's face it, that's why Doug Armstrong, he's GM of the Olympic team, Don Sweeney's GM of the Four Nations team, but it's all one big process. And John Cooper's the head coach for both. And you may be a bubble guy that didn't make it here for Four Nations, but you may very well be part of the plan for Italy. So all that is part of the communication with the guys that didn't make it. Another player, by the way, that I know that got a phone call from Team Canada was Drew Doughty. He hasn't played all year, and he still is away for, you know, he's not going to play again for about another 5 or 7 weeks. But he got a call because he's a guy that was going to make this team had he not got hurt, during training camp. And the message was, hey, let's see how you're playing when you come back, and if we have an injury on D, you might be the first call, depending on how you look. So Team Canada really trying to stay on top of, obviously, not just 23 players that they selected, but all these bubble players that they want to make sure they keep good relationships with, because phone may ring at some point here. Still 2.5 months to go before the tournament.
Now, Team USA, they look loaded. tons of talent up front. The defense, so mobile. The goaltenders, 3 of the best on the planet. What are your early impressions of the American squad that was named on Wednesday?
Well, number one, I think it is the deepest and most talented team in best-on-best hockey history for Team USA. I say that with a complete straight face. This is the most talented team they've ever had at best-on-best. Having said that, and listen, when you can not put on a guy like Cole Caulfield or Tage Thompson, it tells you how deep they are, or a John Carlson on defense. I mean, these were all shoo-ins 15 years ago on a Team USA, players of that nature. Not anymore. So many different options for USA hockey. And I truly believe they are the deepest team going into Four Nations. That doesn't mean necessarily I'm going to pick them. We'll see. But if I'm going to nitpick, you know, I don't know. I'm not in love with the Vincent Trocheck pick. You know, listen, he's a very good player. He's had a terrific career. I just think that, you know, Cole Caulfield, even if he's just a power play guy for you, all he does is score, or the range and talent of a Tage Thompson, I don't know. I would have taken either one of those guys over Vincent Trocheck myself. But I'll tell you this, if you look at a lot of the names on Team USA, you know, a lot of those guys are guys that have played a lot of playoff hockey, and certainly you can't say that about Tage Thompson and Cole Caulfield overall. I mean, Cole Caulfield had the run in 21, but you know what I'm saying, like in terms of playoff experience. So that was certainly part of the criteria, I think, for Bill Guerin in selecting Team USA.
And then for Team Sweden, always strong on defense, just an incredible history of incredible defenders in Team Sweden. And between the pipes, it's the same thing. I guess my question is, up front, Pierre, does this team have enough scoring to keep up with the likes of a Team Canada or a Team USA?
And so especially down the middle, listen, it's a really deep team. I know a lot of Swedish observers actually think it's their best team since the team that won gold at the Torino Olympics in 2006, by the way. A team that had Lidstrom and Sundin and Alfredsson and Forsberg. But I look at down the middle especially, and you're going up against USA and Canada and even Finland. I mean, Finland down the middle, you know, so that's where I wonder, will Sweden organically produce enough offense? I had the chance to speak with Swedish head coach Sam Hallam. It was late at night for him in Stockholm on this day, but, and, you know, deep on the blue line, deep in goal. He feels that he put together a roster that can really be ready for different situations in that tournament. That it's a flexible roster with speed and skill and size. And he said that one of his hardest decisions, because he made the roster selections, the head coach for Sweden, that's different than the other teams. But he said that the last few forward, which surprised me because I thought he'd say all the D he had to pick from, but he said the last few forward spots were the hardest for him because he obviously left off some good players. You know, Willie Mecklin from San Jose, for example, Michael Backlund from Calgary, they weren't named. But he specifically mentioned, you know, a guy like Victor Arvidsson, for example, and he mentioned Gus Nyquist. He says those guys can move up and down your lineup depending on what happens in that short tournament, i.e. injuries or different matchups, or we got to shake things up. And that's what he looked for at the end, as guys that can be comfortable on any line that they're going to play on. And that's why guys like Arvidsson and Nyquist got on. But if you ask me, to me, down the middle offensively, I don't know if Sweden matches up with the other three teams.
And then there's Finland, and just a great start, really a great week for Patrik Laine. Just an awesome ovation at the Bell Center in his debut on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, he earns a spot on Team Finland. How much do you think this could actually mean, Laine's inclusion to Team Finland, Pierre?
I think they're pretty excited. I mean, Alexander Barkov is really close with Laine, and I think behind the scenes, Barkov was pushing for this. You know, when I spoke with Finland general manager Jari Lehtinen about a month ago, or late October, early November, there was some hesitation in Lehtinen's response when I asked him about Laine, and I get it. You know, back then, Laine was still in the middle of his recovery, right, in terms of his injury, and he didn't know when exactly he was going to come back, and so what's he going to say, I guess. But I also took from that Laine was going to be one of those real interesting decisions right to the end, and from what I understand, it really was. And I think the reason they ended up including him, certainly having Laine back this week was huge. But the other reason is, as it was explained to me, is betting on his ceiling made it enticing for Finland. Yes, it may be that it's going to be too hard for him. He's barely played hockey over the last 2 seasons. Maybe he doesn't find his form, whatever. They named 13 forwards. But if he does find his form, they don't have a lot of right shots on their roster, and he's such a special, unique player when he's playing his best hockey. They felt gambling on the ceiling was absolutely worth the decision to put him on the roster. I totally agree with them. And again, there are guys on that Finnish roster that are pulling for him and then want him to do well. So I think that was a very popular decision.
Okay, finally, it's time to put you on the spot. You've been going over these rosters. You've been heavily embedded in this entire process. What is your early prediction for who will win the inaugural Four Nations face-off?
So undoubtedly, in my mind, the deepest layered lineup is Team USA of the 4. But I can't bring myself to bet against a team that has McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, Makar. I can't do it. And so maybe Canada's more top-heavy than Team USA. And maybe I'm influenced by having covered the 2010 Olympics and the 2014 Olympics, and I see 87 do 87 things. But you throw in 97, you throw in the best defenseman in the world in Makar, you throw in Crosby's buddy Nate McKinnon. I don't know, man. I can't bring myself to think of a scenario where those 4 players in particular won't decide that event. So yes, I'm picking the team that has the 4th best goaltending in a 4-team tournament.
Listen, if the goalies decide to fight, though, I like Binnington against anybody. So we've got that, Pierre.
Well, I tell you what, there's absolutely no decision that was harder for Team Canada's management than what to do in goal. And in particular, they got to Binnington and Hill about a week ago, and then the 3rd name went right to the wire. And happy for Sam Montembeault, who won the gold medal for Canada at the Worlds a couple of years ago. But that was an agonizing decision for Team Canada.
Yeah, before I let you go, do you think that decision, Pierre, because, we had Marty Biron on here really lobbying for Logan Thompson, and do you think the decision to go with Montembeault is a little bit about looking ahead to Milan and 2026?
I don't know how much of that, I remember asking Don Sweeney that question during this process when I did an interview with him for The Athletic, and how much do you balance what Doug Armstrong is doing with Italy in 26 with what you're trying to do with Four Nations? And he said, obviously you're not ignoring it because it's part of the process. But at the end of the day, one of the reasons he was named GM for Four Nations and Doug Armstrong is GM for Olympics is they did want a bit of separation on the task at hand. Don Sweeney put a team together here that he believes gives Canada the best chance to win a Four Nations, period. Honestly, I think Montembeault's performance at the Worlds a couple of years ago was important for Hockey Canada. And I think that he got a break for part of what we've seen this year because of how lousy his team is defensively in front of him in Montreal. But I could absolutely see the case for Logan Thompson, who's been marvelous this year. And I could see the case for Stuart Skinner, who's been really good of late and who went to the Cup final last year. So, listen, picking the 3 goalies for Canada, not a slam dunk. And by the way, no one's been preordained 1, 2, or 3 on this day. They are absolutely letting the next 2.5 months play out and deciding, I bet you, on the eve of the first game against Sweden, who's starting goal for Team Canada.
Lots more to talk about, lots more to get to before the Four Nations face-off finally gets going in a couple of months. Pierre, this is so much fun. Thanks for this. Appreciate it.
Right on, right on.